we can't all be wrong. And I absolutely feel that vaccines have, it might not be 100% for every child, but I think that the rate going from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 150, we really need to look at the vaccines.
What advice do you give to a parent that has a young child that is coming of age to get their immunizations?
I'm so glad you asked that. What's important to clarify is that we're not anti-vaccine. What we want are the toxins taken out of the vaccine, because mercury was used to preserve the vaccine. It had no reason to be in there medically. It was a cost saver. So what we want are the toxins taken out of vaccines, and we want the schedule to be slowed down. In 1983, kids got 10 vaccines by the time they were 6. Today they get 36 vaccines by the time they're 6. But the lion's share, I think 33 of them, are before the child is 15 months. And that's too many too soon. So what I tell parents is that they have options. They can vaccinate just like the American Academy of Pediatrics wants them to, or they can slow down the schedule, and they can ask, what did you preserve this vaccine with? And if they don't like the answer, they can ask, see if they can get single-dose vials where the vaccine didn't require a preservative. Or in some cases, and I chose this for my second son because my family had an extreme reaction to vaccines. My younger son is not vaccinated. He received a couple of them before I figured out what happened to my older son. But I chose that because I felt the risk-benefit at this point was just too extreme for my family. And I need to tell everybody, I'm not a doctor, that's not medical advice, that's just me as a mom and my husband as a dad deciding to make that decision.
Becky, good morning. This is Brian.
Hi, Brian.
How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for being on the Real News Radio here with us. From my understanding, there's also been recently a case of even the U.S. government admitting that there is a correlation. Is that true?
I am so glad you brought that up. Yes, the Hannah Polling case in the autism omnibus proceedings was conceded in November. And what is really important to point out, and I'm glad you brought that up, is that this wasn't a decision made by a judge or a jury. This was the Department of Health and Human Services, their doctors, their researchers, their scientists, that told the attorneys, do not try this case, just give this child compensation. So I saw it misreported, like on ABC News and some other news outlets, that this was a decision. And that it wasn't a decision. This was the government's own scientists linking this little girl's mitochondrial disorder with autistic-like symptoms. And the wording was very careful because the government said autistic-like symptoms. Well, since there is no blood test for autism, all autism is a set of symptoms. And if you have those symptoms, it equals autism. So basically the government admitted this girl was genetically predisposed. Like, this is exactly what parents like me say. My child had some sort of genetic predisposition, and she received 9 vaccines that day, and she got autism. So this is very, very significant.
Could you talk some more about that genetic predisposition? Some people are much more susceptible to...
Right. This is something that I hope someday that, when a baby is born, we can have some sort of test to look for autoimmune problems or mitochondrial problems. The one thing that I've seen throughout the 8 years that I've been investigating this is that most families have autoimmune disorders in their history. For us, it's my father-in-law has severe rheumatoid arthritis. But if you have things like multiple sclerosis, even like asthma, allergies, lupus, any of the autoimmune disorders, genetically, that might make the baby a little more fragile. And if you have those disorders in your family, I want you to be extremely careful about vaccinating your child. Now, with Hannah Pooling coming out, we are now looking at mitochondrial problems. And there's something called mitochondrial disease, which is very, very debilitating. What we're finding is that the kids with autism don't have mitochondrial disease. They have a lesser form that they're calling mitochondrial disorder. And I'm not a scientist. I'm going to try to explain it a little bit. But mitochondria is the energy within the cells. It's the power plant of the cells. And what they're finding is some of these children's mitochondria are harmed or just not as strong. And then when you put the vaccine on top of that, it really starts harming the mitochondrial cells to where they're not fueling the energy in them as much, and that can throw the child into autism.
With more than 24,000 new cases per year, and as you said, 1 in 50 children coming down with it, why do you suppose the government has been so lax in funding and studying this debilitating disease?
Boy, I don't know. I was just in Washington last month with the Green Our Vaccines rally, and that was my question. I had to ask them, if 1 in 150 children were stricken blind, the whole country would be in an uproar.
That's right.
What in the world is it about this disorder that's making you shy away? And I have to just guess with what I've seen is that I don't think they want to look at that autism could be a man-made disorder. And furthermore, they might be the people that are responsible for causing this disorder.
Do you see it uniformly over the whole country, or does it happen to occur more often in certain regions?
Well, that's what's very interesting. It's pretty much uniform. And the government is conceding that it looks like there's some sort of environmental component. But I kind of throw it back to them and say, the rate is steady throughout the country. And we're not all eating the same food. We're not drinking the same water supply. Our air is all different. The one constant is the childhood vaccine schedule. Start there. That's constant. And we have something like a 92% adherence rate. So everyone's getting the same vaccines at the same time. And these are things that are injected straight into the child's bloodstream. So that's where I think we need to start looking at is, that's the first thing. And they refuse to do it. We've been asking for a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study for years now, and they're refusing to look at that. But I think we could get a lot of information if we looked at the unvaccinated parties, like the Amish. There's a wonderful reporter named Dan Olmstead that did study the Amish for years, and he found only 3 children in the Amish community that developed autism. All 3 were adopted and had been vaccinated, but other than that, there were no autistic Amish children.
Wow, that speaks volumes. My next question was going to be, does other countries have this same disease? Do they